A world of pure imagination, degrowth, education, science and culture as planned by a painter, storytelling, nature, transforming the abstract energy of questions through conversation to ideas like a kind of clean combustion, discussing the best our buoyant species can be, and, well, counting the spirals on a snail shell. Beautiful, sustainable, tactile. The world is only progress if it makes its children smile.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Solacene. This is the 13th week in our nature series.
Yeah.
And Aaron just introduced what the Solacene is.
Yeah, I was thinking that sometimes I kind of make the mistake of just assuming everybody listening has listened to previous episodes. So I thought I would kind of introduce the entire premise of the podcast and kind of summarize the 4 semesters that we've had as well. It's something of a prose poem, I suppose. But then I was thinking, so I ended it on like a nice note. The world's only progress if it makes its children smile, because something we often talk about is that there's a lot of claims about technology and health and life duration and economy and things like this, kind of made to support the idea that the world has only gotten better in almost every facet. And Solacene is kind of like, but there are these 3 facets at least which could be really, really ideal. And that's what we talk about. And I was like, well, making kids smile, like that's a nice thing. But there are some things that I feel like make kids smile which aren't so nice. So I was kind of using the allegory in my head all week of like candy. Because candy, you know, children love it, but maybe it's not the best for them. And I kind of worry because I feel like this is like a little bit of a rant to start this week's episode, just because it's been on my mind a bit. And some of them are topics that we've talked about before, like the metaverse or AI, and especially how these kind of corporations very cynically target very young people, mostly because they know that the older generations have been raised in a more like free and reasonable way, I think. So it seems kind of like a predatory capitalism, that's what I'll call it, where it's like, well, we know that most people see through this as nonsense, but young people who don't have those capacities yet and still think that junk food is just a great thing, you know, we'll target them. And then in 20 years, it's like, everybody's just going to be playing Fortnite all day. And that makes me really sad. And you were also talking a little bit this week to me about deepfakes, which is, for those who luckily don't know, like the burgeoning technology of, what would you call it? Or how would you describe it?
Impersonating famous people or voices or even familiar voices to say something that they didn't actually say.
Using like technology or AI. And something that like we always kind of gripe to each other about is, well, what is the benefit of this kind of thing? What is the like potential upside? Because all everybody ever talks about is the downsides. And it happens, you know, it's kind of a meme with us that people say it about social media, like, well, yeah, you know, I think it has its drawbacks and its problems, but it's like no one ever actually talks about the good things that it does. And I feel that's the same with something like deepfakes. So I went on Wikipedia and looked at applications, like the uses for it, because I just wondered if maybe I wasn't being imaginative enough. And the list was blackmail, political misinformation, social media, internet meme, pornography, sock puppets, and then there was a small section for like acting and art, because sometimes it's like Disney wants to make a Star Wars prequel, but we don't have young Harrison Ford, so we're gonna, you know, kind of deep fake his face in. But I just think, and I mean, I love movies, I love art, but I feel like that very tiny potential artistic upside is in no world like, you know, worth it compared to the downsides.
Yeah, I very firmly believe.
But it just makes me feel sad because like society isn't really voting for this. It's just kind of being driven by like
people who want to make apps to make you pretend like you're your grandmother or what have you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I see this technology as perhaps the one that pushes us into either complete Wall-E people or into basically being forced to degrow and quit the internet in some capacity.
Yeah.
Because already there's deep fakes being circulated. So I can see within even 5 years, like you can't trust even if it was someone you know, like, it looks like someone you know, it sounds like them, but it isn't actually.
I mean, I feel like that's kind of the optimistic view. It might be called like accelerationism, where a part of you kind of wants this to keep making the news because then people will get really turned off by it. But there's also like a part of me that's like, kids probably love this. They love like watching videos of like Trump dancing or stuff. Or like, we felt that way with AI art and the metaverse. We did a whole episode about the latter, and it just makes me sad because, as I say, it's predatory and it targets very young people who, you know, soon will be like driving voters and workers and buyers and things.
Yeah, and right now there's a degree of intelligence you can use to say, okay, this is fake. But then younger people and often older people don't have that skepticism, that cynicism that some of us have. But in this podcast I was listening to, it was on Babbage, the Economist podcast, and they were talking about how there's certain audio fakes that you can't, like a human could not detect. They have to run it through a software which detects, it recreates the vocal track of the person that would have made that. And if it's anatomically impossible, then that means it's not real. So it's like, obviously a human couldn't discern that. And that's right now.
Yeah.
And therefore, since the people making this technology know that this counter technology exists, they can then try and work around it so that it's completely impossible to detect. Yeah. So I'm hoping it doesn't happen.
But
like,
it will, though.
I know.
That just will happen. That's what annoys me. It's just like, technology is kind of holding society hostage like this in ways that nobody ever decided that, like, that wasn't a political choice that people voted for. It's just kind of happening whether you like it or not, and most often to your children.
Yeah, it's
so
like that.
I think it's tragic.
Like the Doctor Who episode we watched last night. Exact same thing is happening.
Yeah, I don't know if we should breach that or broach that on this podcast, but also, like, just along the lines, a side point about, you know, the optimistic view that people kind of get turned off these technologies and the internet lifestyle in general. I found recently that using search engines, like using Google,
it's getting annoying.
It's awful. It's not a nice experience. Like when I was trying to do any kind of research for this episode or just in other endeavors, it's like, it's just not a nice or very easy thing. And I kind of find myself wishing I was in a library.
Yeah, that feels like it happened overnight. Searching the internet becoming
just this
frustrating.
This corporate minefield.
And everything's paid for. It's like the first 6 pages have just been paid to be there.
SEO.
Yeah, and it makes me a little bit grumpy. Because even when you're trying to buy something in real life or on the internet, it's just like, you don't have any idea what's actually the people are voting for. It's all just voted for with people's money and sponsorships and so on.
Anyway,
thanks for coming to our TED Talk.
Continuing the negative vibes, though, you said you had a event that you wanted to unleash.
I think I'm going to save that perhaps for next week.
Sure.
And it can be a question. Like, the question is, what is greenwashing and how does it apply to the Solacene?
Yeah, I don't think that's nature related enough.
It's not? Okay. I thought greenwashing was.
No, maybe we can. Maybe we can naturize it or something. But okay, today's 2 questions are about poaching, hunting, ethics, the laws, potential conflict between tradition and law, and also about the unity of materials in design. So we're going to start with the poaching question, which I believe you had another soapbox.
I was going to say, if anyone's sad that I just postponed my rant, get ready for another one, because this week I learned that sealing is legal. In my brain, I just thought sealing was illegal.
Yeah.
Because of the techniques that are used to kill seals.
I'm going to play devil's advocate.
The thing is, okay, so I learned about sealing in university, like the whole culture and like it's always been a point of contention. It's a very Canadian thing, but it happens in 9 other countries. So I'm just going to speak about the Canadian context because it's a very traditional Indigenous practice, is like the seal hunt and using seal meat as a food security tool and also a cultural tool. So it's like they use the whole seal in Indigenous tradition in Canada.
And I think crucial is it's necessary because like what else is up there?
Exactly.
They can't farm really, that kind of thing.
So it's always been a point of contention when PETA or Greenpeace was advocating against the seal hunt that Indigenous people were fighting back. And normally in Canadian politics and Canadian activism, Indigenous people are often on the side of the activists. Like there's tends to be a alignment with
Yes.
traditional values and environmental values.
It's true.
And in this case, they were conflicting. But that's not what I'm going to rant against. It's
Okay.
I'm not ranting against the sustainable, traditional seal hunt, because that's just like, well, obviously, they're not going to, like, there's not going to be millions of seals killed by a small group of people who
Correct.
are doing it sustainably.
Yep.
But there are millions of seals killed by the commercial whale hunting season in Canada, which happens from November 15th to May 15th every single year. And it's contributed to by off-season fishermen. About 6,000 people partake, and it's a very big industry. And there are technically quotas against killing more than a certain number of seals
Yeah,
for
I think
like
it's 2 million total.
2 million
Don't
total.
quote me though, but I think that's it, yeah.
Yeah. So there is a quota, but there is no fine if you go over the quota. Therefore, people often go over it. And the seal population is no longer in danger. Like in the 80s, it was endangered. The numbers were just going down. But now, because it's being kind of well enforced socially, I suppose, the demand has gone down. The population is stable. But that's not the issue that I have. The issue I have is that the way that people kill seals is by beating them.
I kind of looked into this a little bit, and I think, like, in 90% of cases, what happens is the seal is shot with a gun, and the spiked club, a club with nails sticking out of it, essentially, is used to finish them off. Like, that's what should be happening. That's what they deem the most humane way of doing it, because otherwise it's like the gunshot might not kill the seal, and so...
What I understood was that they often don't actually shoot the seals because there's a $2 thing deducted for every seal hide that has a
bullet hole in.
Yeah. So the humane way would definitely be shoot it so that it is just ended. But no, they beat them. And often when they shoot them at sea, like that's a technique they can use, is to shoot them. If they can't capture it, they're just going to let it suffer in the water. And it just seems like one of the most inhumane practices that is just not even just regulated by the government, but subsidized by the government. Yeah. And it just, like, I came to you in the kitchen, like, crying about this because it's just insane that it's legal. And it's like, I'm sure lots of people make money off of it, but from what I gathered, of these 6,000 fishermen who partake in the commercial seal hunt, it's about 1/20th of their annual income is from this practice. So it's not exactly detrimental economically, and it probably could be replaced by some other form of industry that these people could be reallocated to. And I just think it should be illegal commercially. Similar to, I don't think we should be legally allowed to just commercially hunt deer, commercially hunt wildlife. Farming kind of seems slightly more ethical and sustainable in terms of how it's a bit more controlled. Yeah. Whereas if you were just like, for 6 months of the year, you can go and catch tens of thousands of deer. The deer population would suffer. It would also just be probably not super well regulated because of the techniques people were using.
Well, deer hunting is quite regulated by the Canadian government, right? Like they have the limited number of tags and all that, the hunting season and the like one doe and one buck or something like that.
But this is private.
Yes,
like, this is just like game hunting kind of for fun or for sustenance. And I think seal hunting for sustenance is 100% fine. I guess it's subsistence hunting versus commercial hunting.
Well, most of it, besides the Inuit, what you were talking about, like the fishing community, most of it is for the pelts, right?
Yeah, and they just discard the meat to rot.
Yeah, it's mostly not for the meat, which, from what I can tell, is not very tasty, but I think they use it also to make omega-3 pills.
Yeah, and oil.
That's also, oil. Like there's an industry there. I think the seal case study is very interesting and good to mention first because it kind of gets to the heart of the discussion, which is about ethics, and it's about hunting, farming, sustenance, fur, fashion, fun, sport, that kind of thing. And do you think that, like, where would you put what you describe as quite a barbaric practice with the seal hunting compared to, say, factory farming?
Seals are very specific because of the clubbing. That's what really puts me over the edge. I think ethically it is slightly...
I think they're about on par.
Yeah, they're like
they're
pretty
both
much the
quite
same.
evil.
Like they both hurt the animal's well-being.
Yeah.
At least with the seals, they get to live a life of freedom until they're killed.
I mean, almost all the seals killed for the hunt are like 3 months old. So that's kind of a shame. Because it's pretty much like there's the law that you can't kill them when they have the white coat.
A hood, yeah.
But then as soon as they lose that, they're free game.
Oh my gosh, I can't.
But
and
yeah,
like...
I think part of it is like seals are cute. I do think that's an element of it.
Yeah, they're super charismatic. There's like a big issue in Canada as well with the minx hunt. Minx? Yeah. Which is also, if not worse, at least equally unethical, but they're less cute and it's less gory a scene.
Yes. That's
so like Greenpeace has dropped their advocacy against seal hunting in favor of some more things that are actually issues to the food chain or issues to the species. But I think there's enough people that we can advocate for all the animals.
That's true. I think the seal hunting is also a little bit of an outlier case because, as you say, there's the seeming brutality of the beating. But even though I do think, like, if that just kills them quickly, sorry to get kind of morbid on the podcast, but then that's obviously a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's the same with, like, we're going to talk about hunting. I just think everyone can't be hunting.
Right.
But as it is right now, it's very regulated and it doesn't threaten the species who are being hunted in Canada. And it's like, if it's humane, it's fine. But if you're capturing a deer and like torturing it,
right,
that's just
I just
unethical.
don't think that happens very often.
Exactly.
I mean, where we come from in Nova Scotia, it was a huge hunting culture, especially for deer, squirrels, moose, that kind of thing. I would often kind of watch. I wasn't compelled to hunt myself, but like I had kind of a respect for it. It wasn't exactly my culture, but yeah, I thought it was kind of a cool thing. I found that the justifications for hunting, especially for deer, I had it kind of retread for the seals is that, well, it's population control, so we need to do it. And I wanted to talk about that on the episode because I think that's already kind of arguing from a logical place that isn't, I wouldn't say it's illogical, but it's not Solacene for sure. Because the reason deer populations might go out of control if they're not hunted is because they're compressed into a tiny space because of like human habitations, and also because all their natural predators have been largely like they're away, like the bears or like I don't know, whatever kills deers. So I think that's a little bit of a fallacy because you should be thinking like ideally anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the same with the seals. It's like, well, it actually threatens the cod industry or something like that, but that's just a lie. Like maybe it did for 1 year in 1973, but it's not still true.
But I just mean that naturally, of course, they wouldn't, because naturally ecosystems have a balance. Like they would only be seen to threaten cod populations if that was even the case because of human interventions in the first place.
Yeah, because we want a certain amount of cod. Because we want a certain amount of space without deers or without animals. So the hunting culture as a aesthetic thing in the Solacene, how do you think that will translate?
You mean like camouflage and that
guns?
Cabela's?
Cabela's, the store, yeah.
Cabela's is kind of like the mecca for hunters, I think.
So it's the mecca of hunting, you could even say.
Yeah, the mech. Mounted equipment, like the mech. Because I feel like every week in high school, people would kind of be excited because one of the people in class would be like, oh, this weekend I'm driving up to Cabela's.
Yeah.
And they'd like get things for other people, which is just like funny. But do I think it'll be there? There's something about the neon orange and the camo, if we're just talking like solely aesthetically, that I don't really think is that cool.
Don't love.
Fishing maybe a little bit more is kind of cooler.
Yeah. I think fishing will definitely be more common in the Solacene.
Really?
Because one, the rivers and streams and ponds won't be polluted, so the animal populations will be like sustainable.
Okay.
People will have a knowledge of sustainable fishing practices, and
hopefully
then
fewer plastics in there.
Yeah.
Waters.
So right now it's like if everyone started fishing overnight, all the fish would be gone.
Yeah, similar to hunting. I mean, I think like in a very broad way, I think hunting is more ethical than factory farming, certainly, but less sustainable.
Yeah, it's far less sustainable. Even I'll look for the exact numbers because this was interesting to me. farmed animals are 60% of the world's mammal mass, is what they called it. It's like the mass of mammals on the planet.
Yes.
And for birds, it's even higher. It's closer to 75%.
Chickens.
So chickens and turkeys and ducks and so on.
Farm ducks.
Yeah. There's ducks on farms.
Sure.
But so if we wanted to meet the world's current meat consumption with hunting, that would just be disastrous.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Solacene, meat demand would be down, and then people's and hopefully wild populations of animals would be up. So there'd be a bit more of a middle ground. I don't think everyone will be out there catching their own meat.
No.
But I do think some more will be.
Yeah, some more. And also, I feel like it should almost be kind of not a necessary thing, obviously, but a more common thing that people do it at least once in their life.
Yeah.
So like, you kill an animal to eat it if you want to be an animal eater.
Yeah, maybe when you're 18, you have to choose if you're going to be vegetarian or if you're going to be
like a divergent
herbivore.
Thing.
Yeah,
you have to like cut their hand and bleed into the bowl with the meat or the bowl with the herbs.
Yeah, and then you have to choose. And if you choose the meat, then you have to go out on a hunt.
Right, and if you choose the herbs, then
you don't have to do anything. You can sit home and eat your lettuce all you want.
Yeah,
maybe you have to work on a lettuce farm or something.
Okay,
but you could also be a pescatarian. You could fish. There's so many options for diets, but I think the diversity of diets will continue, but perhaps the people, like the meat eaters, will definitely be less all-consuming when it comes to the animals.
I think they'll be more all-consuming. They'll eat more of they'll consume more of the animal.
They will.
So
there you go.
What do you mean?
I just meant they'd eat less meat overall.
We'll see. Poaching. I kind of didn't have much notes for this because it's like bad in the Solacene. But what I was kind of curious about was, why does poaching happen?
Mm-hmm.
Which species are poached? And I heard about the pangolin, which I did not know about, but is apparently like the most trafficked mammal.
They're weird animals.
Yeah, they're the ones that like inspired that Pokemon. I don't remember which one, but they're kind of scaly, hard, aardvark-looking, coily-looking mammals.
Yeah.
But people don't really know about them like they know about the rhinos and the elephants, the poaching problem. But I had the stat, it's like, as of 2019, 195,000 pangolins were trafficked in 2019 just for their scales. And 4 of the 8 species of pangolins are critically endangered. And part of it is the scales, like they use it to make boots and clothes and stuff. But also, much like the ivory, they're viewed as having like mythical, medicinal powers.
I
which
see.
Is obviously not a good,
belief.
Not doing well.
Yeah. I was blown away at how much poaching still happens, and also that only 6 countries in the world regulate poaching or have a commission to track it, sort of, and like have an idea of how much is going on. And one of those is India, and the other 5 are on Africa.
Poaching, it just makes me sad, though. It's sad. I don't think we can add much more to the conversation as a thing, because our Solacene, like the selling point is like, we're imagining this thing, but like it doesn't take much to imagine
how the solution to poaching is just no poaching.
Don't poach.
Yeah,
I think it's like the stat I had as of 2015, 30,000 elephants were killed each year.
Isn't that crazy?
Trade, yeah, and it's like jewelry, carvings with the ivory, and again like the medicine thing. It's like
mystical properties.
Yeah, especially in China and I think Vietnam. But it's like, even if that's a key part of the culture, it's not
sustainable.
Yeah, shouldn't do it.
Sometimes you have to make compromises, I think.
There was this quote that said, "The earth is large enough for all to share, but mankind's heart is not large enough to care."
That's such a mum quote, but I like it.
Yeah.
I also had a mum quote for later on, so we'll be equal in that there's 100 million sharks killed every year.
Oh.
Poor sharks. And whaling has been outlawed since the 80s as well, similar to sealing. And whales basically drove the Industrial Revolution. Like, whale oil was used for kerosene lamps and so on.
Yeah.
So it was like a really, really big driver for
what we have for all this
lovely things.
Yeah.
But then we realized, 90% of the blue whales are just gone. And then they were endangered. And so the International Whaling Commission was formed, and they said, okay, no more whaling. But then slowly countries started to kind of drop out all over the place. Like, it's not just concentrated to one area. Like, all over the world, countries are dropping out or protesting the commission or finding ways around it. Like, there's places that will do research ships, and they'll say, we need to catch a whale for research to see how much plastic's in its belly or whatever. But obviously they won't just do that. They'll catch more than they need. And
yeah. It's kind of a shame. Like, I think the basic way you can describe all this history of poaching and hunting is the tragedy of the commons, right? Like,
exactly.
It's fine when the earth only has X amount of people, but since we've grown to Y amount of people, these practices, which were maybe kind of benign, if a little bit inhumane, with regards to, we want to do this for medicine, even if it's a bit pseudoscience, or we want to get this for fur, even though it's a little bit unnecessary. Now it's just outright like bad and unsustainable.
Yeah.
Speaking of outright bad and unsustainable, the organism of the week for this week might be familiar to you, Alicia. Ta-da!
The sea anemone?
Yep, it's a specific species of the sea anemone. I realize my drawing kind of looks like a rubber glove.
It does look like an orange glove.
Yeah, I kind of colored it in as orange. It's more of a pinky color, even though there is some variety. It's the northern red anemone, or the Solacene felina. And we saw this yesterday.
We did.
Because we went to the Montreal Biodome, which was very fun, cool, rainforest, St. Lawrence River, penguin having exhibit thing, potentially unethical in some areas, but we'll disregard that because we really like starfish and invertebrates.
Yeah.
And capybaras. Actually, it sounds more unethical the way I say it, but yeah, that was
that was there.
That was there, and we were kind of walking around and spotting everything and saying like, hey, there's like at least 2 different organisms of the week here.
Yeah.
So I thought, now there's another one, because I just made one of them an organism of the week. And my favorite part was like the rocky tidal pool, cave, starfish, anemone, that one creepy fish that was just staring at us from underneath this little cave with the bright wide eyes. That was my favorite part. The northern red anemone is found in the North Pacific, in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, like I said, and in the North Atlantic. They're animals. For some reason, I didn't know that. I just kind of thought...
They give off plant vibes.
They give off plant vibes a lot, but they have a stomach. So their lifespan is approximately 60 to 80 years.
Wow.
Yeah. They're hermaphrodites, so they start male, become female.
Huh.
They can also reproduce asexually. So it's like this base of it is called the foot. When it moves, part of this kind of can break off.
You've shown me the video of them jumping.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it's like budding. Parts of it can break off and then
see.
Just becomes an identical.
Creepy? Cool.
Yeah. Creepy cool.
Yeah.
Because it can do both ways.
Yeah.
When it reproduces sexually, it says the males, I guess the younger ones, just kind of release their sperm out into the currents. The females kind of release their ova out into the currents. And then it just
hopefully
happens
find each
where
other.
it happens. So maybe that's a Solacene way of reproduction. I don't know. I think it's cool. What else? They're tentacles on the top. These are a defense mechanism and also the way of getting prey, because they can eject little darts of stinging cells, which paralyze like fish and stuff, and then they get swallowed through the mouth/anus.
Yeah, my cousins had a sea anemone in their aquarium.
What?
And you could feed it lettuce, I think.
Oh, man.
Like, it was really weird, but they're like, don't touch it, it'll sting you. So,
they seem
cool.
they just seem like a plant, like you said.
Yeah.
And also I want hundreds.
I see.
The collector. I just want some.
Gotta catch them all.
Yeah.
I have a question for anyone listening who goes to Dalhousie. Tell me if the tidal touch pool is still in the Life Science building. I'm curious if anyone can go track that down and tell me, because I missed that little pond. There was a pond at our university you could go and just like touch the things in.
We used to hang around there a weird amount.
Yeah, we probably visited it like several times a week. But it's cool, and I wonder if it still exists, because it seems like the kind of thing that would be shut down during the pandemic or something like that.
Just that lingering scent in there.
Oh yeah, it always smelled like sludge.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool. A little ecosystem you could touch. Tell me about what you're wearing, Aaron. Describe to the listeners this 4-part special.
Okay. White socks, brown trousers. What would you call them? I don't know. Trousers. Pants. And a white polo shirt. It's a 3-part.
Yeah.
And underwear, I suppose, but...
Yes, I guess we don't need to talk about that. But what are they made of? Do you know?
Cotton. Cotton. and probably a cotton polyester blend
on the old socks.
Yeah, on the pants, no.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So the reason I ask is because the next question is about mixing fabrics, mixing materials, and how that will be approached in the Solacene. I've had my mind slightly shifted on this one, but I think it's an interesting conversation nonetheless.
That's what I think also. It's like, this isn't really prescriptive about just describing this is how the Solacene will be. I just thought it would be a cool thing to discuss, say both sides of. So, I want to start with the biodome.
Okay.
Because the way we walked around there, how was it like laid out?
By region?
Yeah, by region. So there was an Arctic place, there was two different forest place, like a rainforest and more of a northern one, and a little river place. And I was like, it was nice how they were all in their own places. And some zoos, it's like, you have this next to this, and it just doesn't make sense. This one was like walking into an ecosystem, and it felt natural and whole, even though obviously it was a very artificial place. But it was a lot more natural than had you had the sea anemones right beside the capybaras, right beside the penguins. And so I feel like that's kind of it's a biomimicry with our design where we can emulate that cohesion a little bit.
Yeah, and I think what makes humans is that we are able to bring together different materials or different species from different places and kind of still make them look aesthetically appealing. However, ethically or like aesthetically, I think it might be, we've definitely brought it too far. Like in one piece of furniture, the wood's probably from one side of the world, the metal fixtures have been imported, and then it was assembled in this country and then sold in this country. So it's like a bit too crazy. And the reason, what I was thinking of in the Solacene is that it's fine if something is assembled from wood from a few different places, but I think the fewer elements to an electronic, to a garment, the easier it is for you to fix it or for you to find replacements. Like Patagonia makes those jumpers that have the pocket, and the reason it's a different color is so that you can just kind of replace it with whatever fabric. You don't have to go to them and get like a specific one. And I think to an extent that fixability is very, very important and almost integral to the Solacene ethos of just like degrowth, I suppose.
Yep.
And that's best described by just simplicity. So it's like your whole shirt is cotton. You can then replace the sleeve with another cotton. It doesn't have to be exactly from that manufacturer. Like Lululemon, they have like a patent on their fabric. So you're not going to be able to get it unless you go back to the company. And obviously you can't open up an iPhone very easily.
Yeah.
You can't. And if you need a replacement headphones like I do, you have to go to Apple. You can't just like get it from wherever, let alone locally.
Yeah, but that's just how things used to be, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was thinking about online shopping and just travel, because I feel like more people travel now and get souvenirs than ever before. So our houses are kind of like this mosaic or like this collage of different websites or different countries and stuff. And like, the thing is, I didn't want to say, like, this is just bad, because it's kind of cool. I mean, we did it when we went to France. We were like, really like this little farm wall knitted thing. So we got that. And it's like, that's something very not local. So I didn't want to just say like one is good, one is bad. It's just something like you talked about, generally speaking, the fewer components and maybe the more compact the sourcing of those components. I think that's kind of a design principle that we can sometimes aspire to as like, that's cool. I was thinking also about like Animal Crossing and how every villager has their thing. So it's like there's one of them that's like a jock, and then you go into their tiny house and it's just all full of weights and it doesn't make any sense. Or like one of them is into writing, and so it's just stacks of paper and pencils and stuff. Or like branding, right? With outfits. Some people say you shouldn't mix like Puma and Under Armour or something, because that kind of looks bad on an outfit. It's like, I don't think that the Ultra Animal Crossing cohesion is necessarily great. But I also feel like there's something to be said for the simplicity of it.
Simplicity is the word for it. I think when we're trying to think about design, it's just easier. It's like if you are wearing all one color even, it's just like that'll look good on anyone. and it will just be easier for your brain to pick out. Right now,
it's tempting now because we have everything available to us. Like in the past, for most people, like let's say you're building a house, it isn't an option to get your wood imported from 2 countries over. Everything had to be local, and what this resulted in is like a town or a street where almost every home looks the same. And people, like theoretically, you might say that's monotonous, but everybody loves Paris because there's such a consistency in the homes and everything. And we would always often bemoan on our old campus, shout out Dalhousie again, the fact that it just looks like every building was built from a different era using different materials because it was.
Yeah.
And it didn't look great. No.
I think also we have to combat the paralysis of choice and the anxiety that comes with so much choice constantly bombarding us. The internet exacerbates it, but even if there was no internet for a year, you would still have so many choices. You're like we're buying a table. We look at 10 different thrift stores, every online outlet, Facebook Marketplace. You look everywhere trying to find the perfect table. Right. But it's like if you just had one option of one store,
you'd be happier and it would be quicker.
It would just be quicker. You'd be like, well, whatever. It's $10 more. Like maybe I lost $10 on a deal, but at least we have a table now instead of putting it off for 6 months or whatever. Yeah. And I think also when it comes to food, it's the age-old gripe of mums and people really everywhere of what are we going to have for dinner tonight? Because you could literally have anything in the world. You go to the grocery store, you get whatever cuisine you want and you make it. And if we didn't have that option, if you kind of had to eat a bit more in season or chose to set that limitation for yourself, it's like, okay, there's these 5 root vegetables in season, 2 types of onions, and 1 meat that we maybe have in the freezer in preserves. And then it's just easy. And you just kind of eat it. It might get a little boring, but then the fun thing is at the turn of the season, whole new set of ingredients and so on.
And you get much more excited about the apples coming. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think hopefully people kind of get the vibe that we're trying to get across, because it's not exactly nature specific and it is a lot more aesthetic than ethical or sustainable. But yeah, it's just this thing like you look out into a field and everything's where it should be because everything's where it came from. Something like that.
Yeah. I wanted to talk next week about tree rings. I don't know how exactly this will apply to the Solacene. Okay. But I'm finishing up. We're finally having a Solacene book club finale of the Overstory. And there was this whole section about a really old tree being cut down that a man's sitting and like labeling all the rings and saying this is the year that this happened and this is the year this tree was founded, or America was founded, like the tree's older than that. So I think talking about tree rings is a fun idea. Or maybe even just tree biology. Trees. Because it's really fun and cool.
Trees.
And here's my mom quote for this question. It says, "When we're shopping, we see our own hopes and dreams reflected back at us, not immense raw material usage, exploitative labor conditions, and sprawling greenhouse gas emissions. Clothes in the hype era aren't products to own, they're moments to broadcast, to share on Instagram for 24 hours, more like memes than products." I know it's really long.
Was that a mum quote?
It's a quote from the Future Earth podcast.
Okay.
But it's just kind of a quote that I found. It was displayed in a very mum way with like a picture of someone with like
in cursive.
Yeah. But I just think that's what we surround ourselves with. We like reflect a lot on them. But if you just kind of see them for what they are, like a spoon, it's like at the end of the day, it's a spoon. Like you have to see it a bit utilitarian, I think. And also see it for like the natural material that it is. Because we say, oh, that's a cool outfit. But it's like, that's literally cotton from a field. Like trying to kind of see both the item for what it is, but also for like where it came from. And I think this is how it connects to nature, is like how we can connect, like literally everything we're surrounded with came from nature, even plastic. And so it's like remembering that.
There's kind of a cool transparency to that type of minimalism. I know people often rag on the greige aesthetic of sustainability fashion, let's say, where everything's just kind of undyed. But it's that for a reason, because it doesn't hide what it is or where it came from. And that's kind of nice in a way, kind of refreshing, certainly. Yeah. To celebrate its roots, let's say.
Certainly. And I always, on the podcast, have referenced the biblical once or twice mention of not mixing fabrics. And so I wanted to finally look into it, because it's not exactly practiced of not mixing fabrics. So I was kind of curious of like why it was in a religious text. And this isn't the only one. Like across cultures and religions, there's things about like there's feng shui, the 5 elements, and having the 5 different elements represented through the materials in your home. But I was curious about the biblical example because I was always think about it and like quote it in a funny way.
In Leviticus, right?
Yeah, it's in Leviticus and then again in Deuteronomy. And it basically says not to mix linen and wool or anything that kind of resembles linen and wool for fear of being mistaken that you have broken the law. But I looked into like why, and there's a few different schools of thought. One is that it perhaps was reserved for people in positions of power,
Right.
but also really practically it creates a really heating effect. And obviously the people who were being told this message lived in a very hot climate.
Yes.
So it was just kind of funny because I always thought it was like some kind of aesthetic
Yeah, so did I. I thought
judgment.
it was like an outfit rule, but in fact it refers to one garment, right?
Yeah.
It's like don't blend these. Don't do 50% linen, 50% cotton in a shirt.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you want to do linen pants, cotton shirt,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
I just wanted to clarify that because it was kind of funny to
So
me.
maybe we've been misquoting.
Yeah, we probably have been. But I do think there's still some merit to thinking like that, of like thinking about the materials that are in your clothes and being intentional about it.
How do you think this guy would feel to touch?
The sea anemone?
Yes.
He would probably feel like Jell-O. That's my guess.